It's not very often that people talk about business failures. Not very often that people talk about $30,000 cash down the drain. I'm
like, hold on now. Dear Marek and Kothney-Issa, you guys are an inspiration. And can we just say that baby Zalayah is a living doll? We are saddened to hear that things didn't go well with the effort to bring the neighbors on board with the tiny home project. But we agree that God must have some even bigger and better plans. So we will just be patient as He opens more doors. Please keep us posted as you determine next steps. We want to continue the adventure with you, wishing you many blessings. I do believe all things happen with purpose, and I believe all will be well. You two keep moving forward and sharing your beautiful energy with the world. Please let me know if you decide to sell or parcel off some of it. I'm in New York currently, but you never know. Finally, I pray you remember what an amazing inspiration your journey is to me and so many others. Thank you for sharing your beautiful life. At your core is love, so you have already won. I pray that you continue to walk in victory and let me know how I may be in business with the Bushes in the future. Always at your service.
So today's video is going to be a little bit different. We're talking about failure. Even though this video is kind of not our normal and not as hype and excited and all these positive things happening in a weird sort of complex way, I'm actually kind of glad that we get to do this video. I think social media has a huge positive side and lots of benefit. You can see people achieving things and doing things and motivate you and all these different things. But on the flip side of that, I think sometimes it can have a negative effect. You're only getting certain glimpses of what people want to show, and you're essentially looking at the highlight reel of somebody else's story. If you compare yourself to that, it can be really damaging and destructive. As much as I hate that, I think in some ways our channel kind of exemplifies that in a way. Like it kind of adds to that, just because we try to focus on the positive and keep things upbeat. And we see sometimes people will say like, oh, I love you guys are so perfect. Everything is just, y'all got the best of it. And we are very blessed, but we are human. We do make mistakes, we do fail. And so I guess that's kind of why I say I'm excited to make this video, because it's an opportunity for us to showcase some of the not so pretty and showcase some of the failures. It is an opportunity to learn. Every failure is an opportunity to learn, because we never want to try to paint this perfect picture like everything is just perfect and always works out. And also we know for a lot of other developers or entrepreneurs out there that are trying to work on a similar concept, want to help them kind of avoid some of the pitfalls that we fell into. Yeah, that's kind of why we wanted to get into it. Also, there's two very specific reasons why we're not making this video. Number one is we're not looking for sympathy or pity or anything like that. And so as much as we appreciate it, you don't have to just like say I'm sorry or anything like that. Like, that's not the purpose of the video. And then number two, we're not making this video to bash the neighbors or the neighborhood or anything like that. Ultimately, everybody's got the right to their own opinions. In our case, because of the property we purchased, an old document that runs with the property, I mean, essentially those opinions are given weight, legally speaking. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's part of it. So to bring people up to speed, in case this is your first time on our channel, about 8 to 10 months ago, we started out on a venture to create a tiny house community within the city limits of Kansas City, Missouri, where we live. We started going through the city's website to understand everything that we needed to do from a zoning and planning and development standpoint. We bought a 4-acre parcel of land. There was lots of work going on behind the scenes in terms of advocacy work, working with city officials, planning departments, site planning, architects, landscape, all of these different components that go into the project. And we actually shared most of the journey right here on YouTube in a 5-part series that we called Building a Tiny House Community. Well, today we essentially have to come and let you guys know that that project has been suspended indefinitely. We're confident that we have a solid business plan and we have more than enough interest in the project to make it come to life, but the location that we chose is one that we don't think we'll be able to make happen.
So in purchasing this property, and even well before we purchased it, we spent a lot of time doing research on what it would take to build a community like this, specifically at the land that we found. So we looked into what it would take to clear it, the grading of it, the utilities, what it would take for us to get the city members on board, the process that we would have to go with the city planning and development team. Like, there was a lot of things that we did to get prepared before we even bought the piece of land. But the one thing that we did not see, we didn't catch, which ended up being the most important thing, was the restrictive covenant. And so
this right here.
Yes. Essentially, it's an older document that kind of governs the lots in the area where we bought. And there's specific language in there that prevents us from doing the type of project that we planned on doing.
You can kind of tell that the letters and the font and the whole thing looks old and ancient, and that's kind of because it is. This was actually written back in 1945 when that big area was first purchased and broken up into individual lots to sell to homeowners. But unfortunately, most of what's in here is still 100% legally enforceable today. There's only one clause that is not enforceable. It's still present in the document, but it's not enforceable.
We'll spare you the gory details of that.
But yeah, if you ever heard of redlining, segregation,
same document.
Same document.
So the only way that we would be able to get rid of this document or change it in order for us to be able to use our land for what we intended it to be would be to get 51% of the lot owners to vote in favor of our project. So you might remember a video a couple of weeks ago that we put out sharing our plans with the neighbors, trying to rally them behind us. Marek had actually worked tirelessly on this document. It had everything from what our project specifically would be, to the site plan, to what tiny homes are, to how they differ from different structures, and how they could vote in favor of us moving forward with this project. So it's been about 2 weeks, a little bit over 2 weeks, and there was a small handful of people that are in favor of it, a small handful of people that were against it, and then the majority of the people we actually didn't hear anything from. So we needed about 51%, like we said, so that was like about 20 households, and we didn't get that.
To essentially kind of go back to what got in the way of this project, I would say there's probably two big issues, right? Number one, we didn't recognize that this was in effect. And then I think the other big miss for us on this project was not getting involved with the neighbors soon enough. You might be wondering how we missed this and how we didn't figure this out beforehand. And everything that's supposed to be posted online might not necessarily be posted online, and that's the problem we ran into. We got online, we got on the county clerk's office recorder of deeds website. We found the original plat for that entire area. We found so much history of title with that property and who owned it before, and all of these other documents that are right there online where they're supposed to be. But this one, even though it's still on the books and it's still legally enforceable, we actually had to go down in person to the county clerk's office to get it. For whatever reason, it wasn't actually uploaded. The other big miss for us on this project. So just because your city's planning and development department has a certain order in which you must like plan out a development project on their website, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most practical way that you should go about it. So for us, when we looked at the planning process, they had certain orders, and then somewhere around like step 3 or 4, which we hadn't got to yet, it was when they said you had to distribute your plans to I think every household that was within 300 feet of the property where the development was going to be taking place. Well, even though they had it as number 3 or 4 on the list, practically in real life, humans are different, right? So when we put lots of our plans together and we started kind of cleaning up the land just to like see what the slope of the land looked like, to them, they felt like, some of them, they felt like it was so much was already happening, and they had been kind of left out of the loop. So I think that's the other big one, is that we could have shared more information on the front end, rather than just going in the same order that the city had listed the steps in. And like she said, you know, most of the people's doors we went to about 40 doors. Most of them we didn't get an answer. Either they weren't home or they didn't answer, whatever. A few liked it. And then there was like, I think maybe 10 or 12 people that represented like
3 or 4 households.
Yeah, 3 or 4 households that came down. And these folks were adamantly against the project. They did not like the idea whatsoever. and we dialogued with them. We stood out there and we, shared what it was all about, who we are, what we were trying to do. And the one thing I walked away from the conversation with was they had already had so many ideas in their mind about what this was. It didn't matter. Yeah. It didn't matter what we said. There was no convincing them that this wasn't going to be run down, poorly managed, not a good development. And that just goes back to what I was saying is, if we would have talked sooner, before people got the wrong idea, perhaps we might have had a better opportunity.
And I think a big reason why the few neighbors that did share their disapproval of our project was because they actually felt like we were getting ready to put up a trailer park, and they did not want that. And I think that is actually a big misconception that we never really fully talk about on our channel, because we're not here to bash anybody else or anybody's way of living, but we do understand that there is a huge difference between a tiny home and a trailer home, in an RV even, and we also understand and recognize the need for tiny homes on their own separate area, because not every RV park accepts tiny homes and not every mobile home park accepts tiny homes. So there's essentially no place for tiny homes to call home. And so that's what we were hoping to bring to that area. And so people were thinking, well, like, what's the difference between them? And there's actually quite a bit of difference. Specifically built like in the way that the tiny home is built. It is custom made. It is built like a traditional house. The literal only difference is the fact that it is sitting on that trailer.
In terms of construction, 2x4 wood frame construction, PVC plumbing, composite shingles, hardy board siding, cedar siding, you name it. Like the way a traditional home is built, a tiny home is built of the exact same materials. And I would think of greater craftsmanship because you have to work with small spaces. Whereas when you think about a mobile home or an RV, not knocking it, but these things are mass produced, typically from cheaper materials, so that the overall total cost of it is lower. And it's just, it's a totally different demographic that the two are really aiming for.
Yeah.
But that's part of that advocacy work. And I think, like we said, we could have did a better job of that on the front end. Number one, without recognizing that there were already certain restrictions against something like this, made our mind frame focus more so on what are the requirements of the city, right? Whereas we first needed to address the requirements of the neighborhood, and then we could move on to the city. We missed that part.
Yeah, so my mom was telling us it's time to be done recording.
Yeah, if you guys only knew, I mean, it's 5 o'clock. We've been trying to record this video since this morning around noon, and we're just now getting to this point. And so that's the gist of it. We're going to make sure our baby is taken care of, but that's the gist of it. That's kind of where we're at with the tiny house project in general. We do think we can still make this happen. We believe that we can find another property that's more suitable for what we're trying to do, and we would definitely address it in some different ways coming out the gate. But I think for right now, we want to figure out how we want to reinvest in that property that we currently own, or if we want to just sell it off. Not 100% sure, still working through some ideas around that. And then secondly, what I'll say is our thought process was, with the baby coming, if we could get this tiny house project off the ground, we then had so much outdoor space to expand and utilize for family and running around and all these different things. That was kind of our thought process with having her. And now that we know it's going to be a while before we can get something like that going and find a new property and everything like that, we have been discussing some other options. So I guess I'll just say, don't be surprised if over the next couple of weeks you see a totally different type of content from us.
Stay tuned for some big news.
Yeah.
That Zalayah is very excited for. Ain't you excited, Mama?
Hey, I'm sorry I couldn't hear you. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing good.
Okay, so I wanted to call you. I just talked to the listing agent.